Hello again everyone, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. Today I'm coming to you from the Tokyo National Arts Center, known in Japanese as the Shinbijutsukan, which is one of the more famous art museums here in Japan. And I thought the museum would be a good place to introduce today's camera, which is the Nikon F, which is arguably the most legendary of the classic Japanese vintage cameras. The Nikon F was introduced with great fanfare in 1959, and the fanfare was great because Nikon promoted this camera heavily before it was introduced. Nikon's rangefinder cameras were quite popular in Japan and in other countries, and Nikon introduced the F as being an evolution of these cameras, which it was. Most of the controls and features are the same between the F camera and the rangefinder cameras, which allowed Nikon's current customers who shot the rangefinders to easily adapt to their new SLR camera. The rangefinder cameras were a proven design. They were very rugged and very reliable, and by basing their SLR camera on the rangefinder design, this ensured that their SLR camera would also be rugged and reliable. But the main thing which made Nikon's F model the success it would eventually become was its Nikon F mount. The F mount was a quick and easy to use lens mounting system, and Nikon introduced a huge variety of lenses for the F mount, from the 6mm fisheye lens to the 2000mm super telephoto. Countless lenses were made by Nikon and by other makers, which would work on the Nikon F. The F was such a proven design that it exists even today. The latest digital cameras made by Nikon use the same mount. You can use these early manual focus lenses on many of the later film and digital cameras, and many of the later autofocus lenses designed for digital can also be used on some of the early Nikon F cameras. The F had an amazing production run. It was introduced in 1959 and it was produced until 1972. 13 years is a long time to produce any product. Nikon followed the old advice that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. As long as the Nikon F was selling in large numbers, there was no need to introduce a new camera or make any major changes to the design. The Nikon F became the choice, the number one choice of professional photographers around the world. It was used everywhere, from deserts to the poles to the jungles to outer space. Some of the most famous photographs of the era were taken with the Nikon F cameras. The Beatles loved these cameras. I have a picture of John Lennon with his Nikon F and his 105mm Nikkor lens attached to it. They were incredible cameras, and remain incredible today. If they were good enough for 13 years of professional use, they're completely adequate for anyone today who wants a simple and easy to use, reliable mechanical camera. Let's take a quick look, or maybe a long look, at the features and functions of the camera and how to use it. And we're going to start at the top here, as I usually do, sometimes usually do. As I said, the Nikon F was based on the Nikon S3 and SP cameras, and most of the things on the top of the Nikon F are the same as they are on, say, the S3. It has the same shutter cocking and film winding lever. Here we have the same film counter, the shutter button, and around the shutter button we have a switch which we must turn back and forth. You turn it to the right to the R button, and this releases the mechanism and allows you to rewind the film. Turn it back to the A once the film is loaded, and then wind the camera until it's ready to go. Next to that we have the shutter speed selector button, and around the shutter button, or not button, dial, there's a chrome collar around the dial which you pull up, and by pulling this up and turning the dial you can select the flash sync speeds, which are visible in the window in front of the dial. On the top of the shutter speed dial we have a pin or dowel which engages the metered prisms. I don't have any metered prisms on specific to the F, but I do have Nikon F2 on hand, and as you can see it has an extra dial on the top of the prism which engages the shutter speed dial on the top of the camera. Moving on, we have the pentaprism itself. This one is fitted with the DE1 eye level prism, which was the standard prism which came on these cameras. People tend to prefer these prisms because they have a very clean and simple design and don't get snagged on anything, and they aren't ugly, as a lot of people think the photomic and metered prisms are. Changing the prisms is not difficult, particularly the eye level prism. There's a release button on the back here. It's a little cold today, so it's a little bit difficult for me to operate the stuff out here as it would be on a warmer day, but when I remove the prism you can see the focusing screen on the inside. And as Nikon produced a huge number of lenses for these cameras, they also produced focusing screens for every situation. And changing the focusing screens is as easy as replacing the prism. You just push the button on the back, turn the camera upside down, and the screen drops out. Be careful with them. The glass part is quite durable and easy to clean. The bottom, however, is easily scratched. It's made of a rather soft plastic, so be very careful. If you're cleaning the focusing screens, only use a soft toothbrush and an air blower. Don't use any chemicals or Q-tips or any cloth to wipe it off, because you will almost always damage the plastic Fresnel on the screen. To replace the prism, you just place it on top and push it down until it locks. Next to here we have the place where you attach the flash adapter. Now, Nikon placed the flash to the side in order to allow the prism to be removed or interchanged more quickly. And you just slide the adapter on here and it ends up with a standard shoe where you can attach a normal flash. And of course here we have the film rewind lever. Coming to the front of the camera, we have a self-timer. It's a mechanical timer. To operate it, you simply turn it to the right and push the button. The shutter is already cocked, and as the lever turns, you can see as it gets near the top when it gets ready to take a shot. So you kind of sometimes the flashing lights on some of the digital cameras are a little unpredictable for the timing when you are trying to use them to take a selfie or a portrait which you're standing in. These old mechanical systems are a little bit easier to read. And also the self-timer is good if you're trying to take a picture with no vibration and avoid any kind of blur from pushing the shutter button. On the top here we have a depth of field preview. As I push the button, you can see the aperture blades moving in the lens. This allows you to see what the depth of field is going to look at as you look through the viewfinder. On the bottom right side here we have the mirror lockup, which was necessary on these cameras when you used the earlier wide-angle lenses. The early lenses were not retrofocus lenses. They were just like the lenses used in the rangefinder cameras. So in order to use them, you had to lift up the mirror, and the rear element of the lens was placed very close to the film. Moving to the other side here, of course, we have the button which unlocks the lens. Moving to the bottom of the camera, on the right side here, we have a dial which allows you to turn to the number of the film speed you are using. That way, I never use this, so I always forget what film I have in the camera, so I should make a habit of using this, or the safest thing is just use the same kind of film all the time. We have a 3/8 tripod socket, and on this side here we have the latch to remove the film back and change the film. And this is something else which is shared with rangefinder cameras. They have the same system. You pull the latch down, you turn it leftwise, and the back door comes off. To load the film, you drop the film cartridge here, you pull the leader across to the spool, you put the leader inside the slot, you push it and wind it up. Make sure that the holes on the film are lined up with the notches here on the, or pins on the film winding spool. When you are replacing the film back, make sure not to slide it up to put it on, because you can catch on the film and damage the film. Carefully place it on top of the film, press down, and then push upward. Then lock the lever, and the film is loaded. As I said, the Nikon F had a very long production run, and this is one camera which I always have to have in my arsenal. I always have to have a Nikon F. I'm not comfortable unless I have one of these sitting in my closet. I always have one loaded with film, and I just love the way they feel. I love the way they shoot, and they're just marvelous cameras. In later films, I'm going to be talking about the later Nikon cameras and a quick preview of those. Of course, as you might have, you caught a quick glimpse earlier of my Nikon F2 photomic camera, and fitted with the wonderful AIS 28mm f2.8 lens. And the F2, of course, was superseded by the F3, which is actually probably my favorite Nikon camera of all time. This particular F3 is a press model or professional model, and yeah, this is a unique camera. Press models weren't widely produced, but there was quite a few of them around. But this one has a lot of history which most cameras don't, and yeah, this is one of the keepers which I really don't ever plan on letting go. But I plan to do videos about the F2 and F3 in the future, so you know, please check back in the future. I hope to have those up in another month or so. In the meantime, I'll be adding some more videos of other cameras, Japanese cameras, as I come across them. If you have any questions about the Nikon F camera or any comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And please subscribe if you're interested in seeing more videos about vintage Japanese cameras. And also, as I said, if you're interested in buying a vintage Japanese camera, please check the description below the video for links to my Etsy and eBay stores. All right, thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time.